Raymond, and I'm here to present my senior Capstone project. So before I start everything, I would like to give thanks to Dr. Martin, Dr. Zakara, and Ms. Koch. They served as my on-campus mentor for this project, and nothing could be done without them. So today, I'll be discussing my research on the impact of artificial intelligence on the labor market. So a brief preface here. My research journey began with a broad interest in how people adapt to technological revolutions. Then, I gradually focused on the impact of the labor market, and ultimately, I crystallized it into examining AI's specific effects on employment. During my fourth trimester, I was working on literature collection and review, and while in winter trimester, I was analyzing and synthesizing all my information into the report. And personally, what makes this research particularly fascinating is that I've been studying AI's evolution in real time, which means new capabilities like deep research or image generation emerged while I'm writing the paper. This process has really taught me lessons about integrating diverse information sources and developing original insights from evolving data. So speaking about shifts in the labor market, what is the first thing that appears in your head? For me, it's Industrial Revolution, right? So throughout history, our labor markets have continuously evolved in response to technological advancement. The story begins in the 1700s when over 90% of the population worked in agriculture, relying primarily on manual labor. Then came the first Industrial Revolution, powered by innovations like the steam engine. Factories started to replace farms as primary employers, triggering urbanization and reshaping social structures. It wasn't without resistance. We see the looted movement. Textile workers are protesting against machines taking their jobs. The second industrial revolution arrived in the late 19th century, introducing electricity, mass production, and materials like steel. This era gave us assembly line manufacturing, which revolutionized production processes and created millions of factory jobs. Workers adapted by learning to manage and operate increasingly complex machinery. By the 1980s, we entered the third industrial revolution, or we call the digital revolution, with personal computers, telecommunications, and the internet transforming work again. We witnessed a massive shift from blue-collar jobs to what we call white-collar jobs. As office work increased, the nature of jobs moved towards information processing and data management, with people increasingly preferring office work over farming or factory labor. And now, today, we find ourselves in the fourth industrial revolution, or we call it Industry 4.0. It begins around 2011, characterized by digitalization, AI, advanced robotics. Unlike previous revolutions, its influence is spreading rapidly across all industries and sectors. Technologies such as AI, machine learning, Internet of Things, and robotics are transforming not just the blue-collar jobs like manufacturing, but also white-collar jobs in sectors like healthcare, finance, education, and so on. Artificial intelligence, or AI, has already been part of our daily life. From Siri operating our iPhone to ChatGPT generating essays and codes within seconds. The fears that accompany advances in AI, which is concerns about job loss, economic inequality, and skills transformation, are very similar to those of previous industrial revolutions. Just as in the looted movement of the 18th century, today's worker view AI with similar concerns. While AI has rapidly emerged as a significant force in various sectors, changes in workforce dynamics, economic demands, and skill requirements are putting pressure on the existing labor markets. While they enhance efficiency, they also challenge our workforce to adapt it in unprecedented ways. AI's impact on the labor market is unknown. Consequently, it must be evaluated how the rise of AI would impact employment and how it will reshape workforce and economic growth. My study employs a phenomenological approach based on qualitative research. This methodology allows me to explore how different stakeholders, workers, governments, developers, and others experience these technological changes. There are three key questions guiding my research. Which industries are most vulnerable or benefiting to AI? which groups of workers will be the most affected, and how should education and training systems respond to increased AI presence in the workplace. As AI adoption accelerates across industries, we need to understand its implications to ensure economic benefits are fairly distributed and workers are equipped with the skills needed for the future. This study aims to bridge the gap between technological advancement and workforce preparedness, contributing to sustainable economic development and social stability. So building on our research methodology, let's examine what the data says about AI's impact across different industries. From 2010 to 2019, AI-related jobs openings tenfolded from 20,000 to 220,000, with their proportion among all jobs growing from 0.18% to 0.72%, as shown in the charts on the upper right. The pattern exists that companies invested in AI-specific roles often reduce their hiring for non-AI positions. We also see that organizations with strong market capitalization, large R&D investments, and sufficient cash reserves taking most of these job openings, accounting for roughly 24% of all AI-related job postings. So the chart down there is showing AI share by tertiles of market capitalization of those companies. And as shown in the charts, top tertiles is on the top, bottom, 2018, and the middle is in the middle, lows in the bottom. Now looking to AI demand in different industries, mathematics and computer science are showing the highest demand for AI skills, with approximately 4% of them requiring AI expertise. By 2019, we also see growing AI integrations in architectures, engineering, life sciences, physical sciences, finance, manufacturing, and so on. Meanwhile, sectors like agriculture, fisheries, and forestry show minimal AI demand. So circling back to my research question, which industries are the most vulnerable to AI? This can be answered based on the nature of tasks performed within each sector. Industries relying on routine, repetitive tasks are most vulnerable to AI disruption. In manufacturing, AI is transforming assembly lines and quality inspection processes again, displacing jobs that survived previous automation waves. The retail sector faces similar challenges with inventory management, customer service, and cashier positions being replaced by chatbots, self-checkout systems, and warehouse robots. We've all witnessed the self-service checkouts in the supermarkets and even the emergence of completely cashier-free stores. AI is expected to reduce customer service interactions by 50% over the next 2 decades, especially in North America. Logistics and transportations are experiencing rapid transformation to self-driving vehicles and smart warehousing systems too, affecting jobs like delivery drivers, forklift operators, inventory managers, and customer service industry has been particularly affected, with AI handling routine inquiries across multiple sectors. Around 50% of customer service inquiries in some industries cannot be resolved without human intervention. While on the other side, industries requiring advanced decision-making, creativity, and innovation benefits from AI integration. For example, in healthcare, AI enhances diagnosis and treatment planning while accelerating drug development. Rather than replacing healthcare professionals, it augments their capabilities. Similarly, financial institutions use AI to streamline operations, improve fraud detection, and enhance risk assessment. Even the IT sector itself is being transformed, with AI accelerating software development through automated coding and testing. Tools like GitHub Copilot has enabled developers to complete tasks 56% faster, allowing them to focus on more creative aspects of software design. And now, you might notice the 2 words I've been using describing AI's relationship with those industries. They're replacement and augmentation, or complementation. So those are the 2 very, very key words in answering the question how AI affects workers across different skill levels. Are labors being replaced by AI, or they're augmented by AI? To better understand this, I'm dividing all the workers into three categories: low skilled, middle skilled, and high skilled. Low skilled workers generally involve routine manual tasks or simple cognitive functions, requiring minimal specialized training. These include positions like data entry, assembly line workers, warehouse staff, and basic customer service roles. For these workers, AI is a replacement technology, and it is built for automating predictable tasks. Study estimated that nearly half of low-skilled jobs in logistics and retail may be automated or eliminated within the next 2 decades. In manufacturing, each industrial robot is replacing between 0.18 to 0.34 workers annually. McKinsey projects that by 2030, approximately 375 million workers globally may need retraining due to AI replacement, with most of them concentrated in low-skilled positions. However, it is important to note that although the risk of low-skilled jobs being replaced is high, new job opportunities have emerged in robot maintenance, system management, and AI infrastructure positions. So I won't say it's a pure replacement, but a transformation of the nature of the work. Middle-skilled jobs typically combine routine cognitive tasks with administrative skills. Some examples are clerical workers, technicians, and paralegals. These jobs have historically been first affected by technological revolutions, and AI is accelerating their hollowing out effect, which means the reduction in employment opportunities and wages for positions requiring a secondary level of education and training, causing middle-skilled workers to transform themselves into high-skilled workers or low-skilled jobs. It is predicted that AI can automate 60 to 70% of tasks in knowledge work with standardized processes. In banking, generative AI is expected to add 200 to 340 billion annually by automating middle-skilled jobs like credit assessment and data processing. It is important for them to learn new AI-related skills in order to complement with AI, but not get replaced by it. For high-skilled jobs that involves complex problem-solving and requires significant expertise, AI serves as a complementary or augmentation technology, rather than a replacement. These include financial analysis, doctors, engineers, or scientists. AI processes large data sets and performs calculations to enhance human capabilities without replacing the core value of these professionals. By 2025, AI and machine learning are expected to create 2.3 million new jobs in highly technical fields like data science or AI system design. High-skilled workers who effectively integrate AI into their workflow are most likely to see wage increases and expand career opportunities. So the figure displayed on the right is showing generative AI could have the biggest impact on high-skilled workers, which previously thought has a low potential for automation. So, just in case if you're confused with what I just said, a summarization will be when AI complements human skills, it enhances productivity and it creates new opportunities for you. When it replaces human functions, it makes you lose your jobs. The adoption to AI leads to income inequality. Positions requiring AI skills is commanding a wage premium of 11 to 16%, with the highest premiums in management roles. And to my surprise, even non-AI positions within companies adopting AI see wage benefits, suggesting the productivity increase with AI adoption. And of course, these benefits concentrate among those high-skilled and high-income workers with skill complement to AI, while other workers may be facing potential reduced income or unemployment. So the figure on the right is showing generative AI could have the biggest impact on high-wage jobs, as you can see the two black dots on each graph replacing the top quintiles of wage. Study also found that age is influencing adaptability to AI integration. Older workers are showing lower reemployment rates in AI-affected fields because they're generally less adaptable to new skills and have lower mobility, while younger and educated workers can be more easily transitioned between jobs with varying AI complementarity. So the figure on top is showing the 1-year reemployment probability of prime age and old age workers. Prime age here means workers from 35 years old to 55 years old, and old age means above 55. We can see that the old age the bar on old age is lower than the prime age. And the figure below is showing the predicted life cycle profile of employment shares by education levels. And so we can see that all workers with college degrees has a higher percentage, has a higher probability in getting into high AI exposure and high AI complementarity jobs. The benefits and challenges of AI integration are not distributed equally across the global economy. My research reveals significant disparities in AI readiness between developed and emerging economies, creating what we might call an AI divide. Developed economies like the United States, Germany, and United Kingdom possess substantial advantages. They have well-established digital infrastructure, high internet penetration rate, and advanced IT technology that enables effective AI deployment. Their educational systems emphasize STEM disciplines, producing AI-ready workforces. Moreover, developed countries have established innovation ecosystems and with more mature regulatory frameworks for addressing AI assets. And in contrast, while countries like China and India have made remarkable progress, many other emerging economies face fundamental barriers to AI adoptions. These include inadequate digital infrastructure, unreliable energy supplies, insufficient research funding, and educational systems lacking AI-focused training. The absences of appropriate regulatory frameworks further complicates their AI integration. You can see on the figure on the right, developed countries like Luxembourg, Japan, and Singapore are showing high AI preparedness and high AI exposure employment. And emerging economies like Tanzania or Afghanistan are showing exactly the opposite. This readiness gap threatens to widen existing economic disparities. To maximize AI's benefits, my research suggests several possible policy interventions. So first of all, education systems must be reformed to incorporate AI literacy from early education, preparing students for an AI-integrated workplace. Simultaneously, governments should establish retraining programs for displaced workers, particularly targeting vulnerable populations like older workers and those in routine-heavy occupations. And digital infrastructure investments, especially for those emerging economies. Broadband access need to be expanded for improved connectivity in rural areas. And finally, some papers suggested that governments should consider redistributive mechanisms like automation taxes to fund retraining programs. And some economists have proposed exploring the possibilities of UBI, which is universal basic income, to provide financial support during workforce transitions. The underlying principle is still the same, that AI should augment human capabilities rather than simply replace them. We should view AI not as an inevitable force to passively accept, but as a powerful tool that we can control its impact. We're standing only at the beginning of an era shaped by AI. Like previous industrial revolutions, AI is transforming our economy and labor markets with unprecedented speed and scope. Our analysis reveals a clear pattern that industries relying on routine tasks face disruption, while those requiring complex decision-making or creativity find AI to be an ally. Moving forward demands collaboration between all stakeholders. By investing in education, infrastructure, and appropriate regulation, we can create a future where AI is not a transformation we're resisting, but it's something that we can shape it thoughtfully to ensure the best interests. So that's about all my presentation. I'm pretty sure that all of you here know what's generative AI, like ChatGPT, right? Okay, I assume it's a yes. So I'm now presenting you guys a video showing how powerful generative AI can be. This is doing a multivariable calculus question here. And then I'm asking it to summarize. This is actually one of my main sources writing this paper. Summarize the 68 pages report. I'm not going to get in trouble. Here, I'm asking for AI to.
Don't go too fast, Baker, because this is interesting.
We're old, we read slow.
It's the way.
No, I'm sorry, it's a video. I'm not going. I'm asking it to produce a snake game. Like, I didn't even change anything, I just copied it into my Python. That's how bad it is. So this is something I want to talk about with AI's data processing. I feel like that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's image generating. And this is the beef research just published like a couple months ago by OpenAI. It spends about 5 to 30 minutes and gives you like over 10,000 words report on your topic. So that's about everything I have. And at the very last, I'm going to show you a picture. Okay, how many of you think this picture is AI generated, or is it real, or is it real and unedited?
Real, unedited.
Well, it's AI generated. Like, of course, I'm not gonna have a picture of Tim Cook taking a selfie in front of an Apple store, but like, imagine if this person is not Tim Cook and the background is not Apple store. Like, what can we believe in the future? That's it. Thank you. So, any questions? Oh, yeah.
As you think about the use of AI in China versus the U.S., what differences do you see at this point? Because as you made a point of earlier, we're in real time, but what do you see as whether it's approach or perception projected by the governments or the use of business, how it's differentiated?
So I don't know if you guys know that OpenAI banned their access in China. So means Chinese people living in China cannot access the OpenAI and cannot use generative AI. It is not until DeepSeek came out that it's free and covers all China. That all Chinese are knowing there's stuff called generative AI and how powerful it is, and they started to play with it. They use it to like write scripts, write poems, whatever. So this ban by OpenAI really like makes Chinese peoples behind, you know, really set the pace down of AI's integration in China. And the problem, and it's the policy problem with China. And as I just said, in like other emerging economies, probably the infrastructure problems that they probably don't have access to like PCs or other digital devices.
Was there any projection on the cost to re-educate non-skilled and low-skilled workers over a period of time?
That's a good question. Good question. So, so from the papers I've been checking, we're now just at the start, and then those like retraining programs are only in the proposal stage, and then I did not find any further information on like what those retraining programs is and how did it work. So if I could have the chance to further investigate into this, that would definitely be part of it. Yeah.
You use the term augment a lot, and I really like that term. As you know, a lot of people are using AI here in the process. And how would you evaluate the way that it's being used versus the way that you think it would be used, should be used to be more beneficial for education?
Say I'm taking an advanced physics class, and you give me a worksheet, and there's a very hard problem that I have no idea how to do it, and then the due date is in like 10 minutes. So I decided to open your website and open ChatGPT, and then you plug the question into ChatGPT the correct way, I think, and this is actually what I've been doing. Is when the answer came out, you're trying to understand it step by step. You should ask the AI to give you step by step solutions, and you try to understand it and make the AI knowledge yours, instead of just copy all what AI said without even understanding it and then submit the homework. So AI in education, I think AI is a crazy teacher that won't get mad at you and then have like almost all the knowledge in the world, and it can even do live search on website. It's almost the best teacher you can find. So teacher should be teacher. Teacher should be teaching you stuff, but not like letting you copy your work.
Did it have a 100% success rate with those advanced physics worksheets?
Yes, that's, okay, the answer is no. That's another reason why you're doing it step by step, because AI makes mistakes too, although the probability is low, but it does exist. Like, it's not recognizing your image right, there's a simple calculation mistakes. So by understanding it step by step, you're also checking the answer from AI if there's anything wrong.
Raymond, how has your investigation into AI affected your plans next year at Washington University?
So next year, I'll be studying engineering, and then it's unclear now. So there's a chance I'm going to coding, there's a chance I'm going to electrical engineering. But whatever it is, the engineering is definitely staying really close to AI. So as you can see, AI is generating codes, and writing games for me. So by researching this, it is important to realize that in my further studies, I should learn skills on how to use AI, how to make AI better tool instead of getting replaced by. Like I just presented the snake games in the video. I wrote the snake games myself 2 years ago. I spent like 2 to 3 hours on it, and it's not as good as what AI generated in like 5 seconds.
You mentioned that AI is like the best teacher. So how should teachers be thinking about that? You know, I'm trying to think about what is my future as an educator if AI is better than I am. What would that look like? What would you say to educators to think about?
So I'm saying AI is the best educator, the best teacher when you're self-learning, and teachers. So for the situation now, teacher won't get totally replaced by AI because it let me give you an example. Like in my English class, Ms. Barrett is actually asking us to use AI to generate answers and compare it to your answers. And I'm seeing that the answers from AI, from even different AI, are pretty much the same. Not exactly the same, but it's kind of the same thing. It does not have as deep understanding of, for example, the book we're reading as human teachers now. And then human teachers can, of course, better connect with students. And then it sometimes gives you like different and more creative solutions and understandings to the text materials. Is there any other questions? No, I think that's it.
I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to settle down, and so we're going to hear minutes into the faculty that came to support us. Just going to enjoy a couple of minutes after a second. want to give one more round of applause for Raymond's previous capstone presentation. So everyone can thank you. My name is Sydney Shaw. This is kind of a combination of my project that I've been working on this entire year. So I studied the prioritization of camps to build stronger students. So let's get on. Ollie? Okay. So, this is me at the age of 8. I had just moved from a small town that I'd grown up in. I loved everything to do with dance, going outside, playing with my little brother. But that being said, moving from a small town was a difficult transition for me, and both of my parents worked a lot. So we were kind of looking for a structure that could fill my summers, but also keep me ready to go back and join school again. So, that being said, my 4th grade summer, I came upon Copper Canyon Camp through a school program that I was attending. I met with the Elks Lodge, and I was eligible to attend summer camp for free. This totally changed the trajectory of my life and like what I want to study as an adult. So this was my first summer. I was 8 years old, the youngest one in my cabin. This is my CIT summer, so I proceeded to follow camp and go on to be a counselor in training. And then this is me, my first year as a counselor there, and being able to counsel with the people that I had grown up with. But though I had a really lucky experience and I really enjoyed the impact that camp has left on me, not everybody has a similar standing, so I wanted to do a little bit of research and see what people around me experience. So, firstly, I wanted to look into New England and see how much money the average New England family pays for childcare. I'd always heard that childcare was like really expensive, but I just had never really looked at the numbers because I never cared. So, that being said, I figured out that about the average American family spends, or New England family, spends about $18,000 a year on childcare. Spending about, almost $1,500 a month. And though this varies in like regions that you live in, but that being said, I also found that about the average family makes $85,000 a year. So with that, and understanding that about a good percentage of that goes to childcare, I wanted to know what would mitigating the cost of camp do for families, and how would that impact the classrooms around them. Okay, so that being said, I came up with a thesis. I wanted to know, with the influence of current scholarships, what are the ways to provide summer camp experiences that align financially for the average American family? I value a world in which education plays a big role in my life, and I wanted to see what would be the possibility for students around me to experience camp and get the same educational experience I did. So I looked into a bunch of different questions, and I came up with 4 main research questions. Firstly, I wanted to know the accessibilities of camp, specifically within New England. Secondly, I wanted to know the educational benefits of summer camp and camp attendance. I wanted to examine scholarship opportunities and other ways that it's made accessible, along with exploring the means by which camp could broaden the population and demographic that camp was made for. So I had a really deliberate methodology, and I really wanted to get connected with the people around me. So I did extensive research, looking into scholarship programs that were already offered, along with connecting with a lot of educators within the area. So I created 2 varying surveys, one specifically for educators, and then one for former counselors that I sent out to see their responses. So the 3 current ways that camp is made accessible is firstly, free summer camp programs, specifically like a Copper Canyon, a program similar. Secondly, after-school programs, summer camp programs that are associated along with it. And thirdly, nonprofit assisted programs. Not only have I attended all 3 of these, but I've also, within my research and my surveys, I figured out that these 3 were the most common. So, firstly, relating back to Copper Canyon Camp, I love to talk about it. This is me, back here, age 8. But this is the summer camp that I attended in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. It's a free summer camp for kids that fall within a certain demographic. It's a difficult program to fund each year. They really do scrape together pennies because it's primarily based from donors, along with the annual auction, which then goes to send a kid to free to camp fund. So with that being said, it's hard to kind of get this program off its feet every year. Another really great part about it is it gets a lot of New Hampshire kids connected. but a downfall is that it's a very specific demographic and it takes a lot to qualify. Secondly is Access. Access is an after-school program that's in Winchester, New Hampshire. This is kind of a minimal cost program that I've attended. Also, this is my brother here. He's in the audience too, so I want to give him a little shout out. But Access is a free or a minimal cost summer camp and after-school program that is for the children of Winchester, New Hampshire. Many of the survey responders mentioned that their schools had similar programs associated. So something like to do with after school or a summer camp that connects and follows through the rest of the year. It's not a glamorous residential camp, but it does help students with their homework, serves them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, along with kind of creating and fostering an environment outside of the classroom with your peers. And lastly, for the nonprofit assistant program, I use the Fresh Air Fund as an example. This is the nonprofit that helps inner city kids from New York attend camps, mostly in the New England region. That being said, similar to the previous two, you have to fit within a very specific demographic to qualify for these programs, and it does require a lot of funding because it is a nonprofit. So, now to get into my surveys, I wanted to define the importance of camp, but looking to define the importance, I needed to find the connection with my community. So firstly, I asked my 17 educators what they thought about camp, and then I followed with a counselor survey with former counselors and campers of various camps throughout New England. I had a primary, so I got 17 responses from this survey and only 6 from this one. So, that being said, to my surprise, I received overwhelming support. It's shown here on the graph that for my primary survey, 100% of educators recommended the attendance of summer camp. And then following that, I wanted to know if skills were obtained and how that worked for the counselors. So it was shown that 6 out of 6, 100%, for the counselors, that camp had positively contributed to their confidence when trying new skills. So with that at hand, I had to think about all the ways that we could connect these surveys and kind of think about like the skills that were developed. And so I came up with 3 main categories that I pulled from there. And it's confidence and sense of belonging and independence. When referring to that, I know it's a big category, but it focuses mainly on the reference to the child's own self-confidence, along with what they've observed in the classroom and how they interact with their peers confidently with the information that they've learned. Secondly, is problem solving, peer collaboration, and social skills. This is a vital component because educators touch on this pretty frequently. They want their students to be able to work collaboratively with their peers and do it efficiently. So, that being said, when I got my second survey back, it showed that all of my counselors had obtained the skill at summer camp. And thirdly is real-world application. Educators wish that their students could take what they learn within the walls of their classroom and expand it outside. And again, to my surprise, all of these skills were then adapted and learned at summer camp. So, following that, I wanted to share some pretty impactful testimonials that were shared with me through my survey. So I'm going to read this first one to you, and then you guys can feel free to read the second two. So my first one, from my main educator survey. What I see at camp is a transformation of kids undergo from a lost puppy dog to confident. Camp gives everyone a new identity and allows them to be an authentic versions of themselves that often doesn't exist at school or at home. Helping kids thrive in this safe space puts me in awe of the power of camp every summer. So these are the 2 other testimonials that you can feel free to read. So with that, speaking with summer camp directors, they can tell you that it's a business and they do need to maintain some funds somehow. So I found in my research that there's really nobody looking at this problem of making camp accessible for everybody. So I wanted to find a way to figure out what exactly makes a child qualify for scholarship, and to see where the gaps in that research are and kind of what kids kind of fall through the cracks. So I created 3 main groups. I found one are federal poverty guidelines, the second are state and local funding programs, and third are camp-specific aids. So, that being said, for the federal poverty guideline, I use the state of Vermont as an example. The nation creates poverty guidelines each year based upon economic income, and I want to refer to this table here because this is our most recent. So looking at a family of 4, let's say they make $30,000, they would automatically qualify for assistance through the summer camp, or most summer camp programs, and they'd kind of be like a flagged area in which that they need help. That being said, only X percentages of families really qualify below this really extreme line. So a lot of families kind of fall out or end up paying full tuition when in reality it's not something that they can really cover. Secondly, our state and local programs. So I did a lot of research to look into this because I couldn't really find a lot. And along the work of my advisor, I found a Rekindling Curiosity program in New Hampshire. And this is a program that's sort of new, but since 2021, they've gifted almost $2 million for kids to attend summer camp. But this is an application program, so a lot of people don't know about it. There's not a lot of advertising about it. And it takes a lot for you to qualify, and it's a pretty long process to actually be able to be enrolled and fully accepted for this program. So that adds some limitations for families with qualifications. And lastly was camp-specific aid. My camp that I work at, and a lot of the camps within the New England region, are part of the ACA, so the American Camp Association. So I wanted to look there specifically, and I found that the average family gets between $100 to $1,500 of aid from that camp. And they do not, that camp association, my apology, but they do not fund the families directly. They actually go through a Ultra Camp Foundation, which then connects to Send a Child to Camp Fund. So that being said, it's kind of this big pool of money that's then kind of gifted out to all the applicants. So money kind of varies depending on the fundraising and things that are going on that year. So to kind of segue into like what are we going to do about it and how are things, right now. Actually, things are, prices are going up. So inflation, $2,000 camps are creating a summer crisis for working parents, and it's complete chaos. So I wanted to know, are there any ways that we can fix this, and how does that look for like your average family? So I found some limitations. According to the ACA, on average, the residential camps families pay between $1,000 to $2,000 a week for summer camp. But it's been reported that 6 million across the U.S. participate in some form of residential/day camp each year. So, following that, you might think, wow, like that's a lot of kids enrolled, like that's a pretty good percent. But when looking at Vermont, the poverty percentage is 9.7, which is, pretty low. Kudos to Vermont, but they don't qualify for a lot of these programs that I just listed for you. A lot of the kids and families actually end up paying full price out of pocket, even when there's multiple kids enrolled in camp. This points to the fact that many families are actually ineligible for aid, and there isn't a way for them to get a hold of this without kind of digging in elsewhere and out of things. So that makes camp kind of a luxury item for a lot of families, and not really like a promoted piece. So what can be done about this, and how can we change? I've proposed 3 solutions. So firstly is town tuition. With town tuition, I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with educational vouchers, but they're often found in towns in which they have some in high schools. You can get a certificate from the government that funds often used for private schools or homeschooling expenses. So a lot of kids actually around here use them to attend VA. That being said, it would entail increasing the town budget and funding, which coincides with education vouchers, and finding a place that summer camp could fit within that. Though this is sort of a stretch and would fall back on the taxpayers, it's one specific option that would be a way to make camp a little bit more accessible and the funding to be there for those who are in need. Oh, oops. Secondly is expansion on scholarship programs. This would work alongside town tuition, and you'd be able to qualify even if you were part of the town tuition program. But it allows further funding for external programs, such as Rekindling Curiosity and things like that, for children and family if they're needed. And lastly is additional camp funding. This would be attack the fundraising problem specifically from the camps. And you can ask any camp counselor or camp director, they're not in it to get rich. I mean, typically they're scraping pennies together to get the camp to run. So, and as a business, it might be difficult to pull in extra funds, but this could be anywhere from working alongside families to find external scholarships, creating scholarships within yours from donors, or finding techniques to fundraise throughout the year. So there are some risk factors associated with this these issues, as I mentioned previously. Societal values are a big part of this experience. So it's understood that camp's not a priority for all members of the society. It hasn't been accessible for everyone to experience. So when you think like, oh, summer camp, like you're putting sticks together and you're singing Kumbaya, like that's not exactly the experience. So that being said, it's gonna look really different for a lot of people when that comes up at like a board meeting or a town meeting. So it wouldn't probably get the whole group to agree. Secondly, as I mentioned previously, is monetary costs that would fall back on taxpayers. Mentioning that not everybody views the camp as the same. The request to implement more like state funding or town funding would require more money from the taxpayers. And it's already been presently seen with the struggle for school board application each year that it's not necessarily the top of people's priorities. So this might be a kind of a difficult stretch. But as members of the town and with people with voices, I really do encourage you guys to speak up for the children in your community if you believe that this is something that is important, because it'll better the future of our generation. So if there's anything you guys can do, is you can scan these QR codes and learn a little bit about camp and how to send a kid to camp. But that's pretty much all I have. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll open the floor to questions. But yeah, thank you. Any questions? Mr. Miller.
I know very little about camps, but I was just wondering, you being the camp kid that you are, and the student that you are, what are some specific ways you feel like you grew as a student from your time at Albert?
Yeah, for sure. So I've always been really outgoing, and I've always loved to talk, so that was something that I had way before I went to camp. But I must say that I was really able to connect with my peers confidently, and I did fall within all three of those categories. I remember being super nervous and sharing a bunk bed with this girl, but we ended up passing notes with each other every single night and just making jokes. And we were I was confidently able to try a new skit and try new games with her, and I kind of made a friend within camp, but also it encouraged me to kind of connect out with the community there that was already established, and that's kind of how I am where I am today. So that's one example. I also I don't know, it just totally shaped who I am. I don't know if I would be able to pinpoint it, because a lot of my positive attributes are from that. So Maya, is that you? Okay.
How do you think all of this will continue, how will camps continue to help students' social connections with the rise of social media, especially with audio?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. I think that a lot of these camps do a really great job of kind of detoxing kids from their devices, which, some, my program, for example, is a week-long program, so it's not exactly, it's kind of a 2-day detox. You're really close with your friends, and then, everyone goes home. But there are programs over the summer that are pretty extensive. They have 4, 7, 8-week programs. So, and a lot of these camps are phone-free. So every single camp that I've been to has been phone-free, so it really does foster that environment. It takes a little bit more to get them, to be sociable if they've got a lot of devices, at home. But I really do believe in camp community, and that they will continue to kind of promote no screen time. So I think that it might shift things a little bit, but so far, so good. Ms. Armiger.
It seems like one of your big takeaways is just the power of camp for the development of the student. What is a way that you might recommend that during the entire school year, some of the values and the methods of camp could actually be incorporated to empower the student?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a good one. I think definitely a big thing that I've taken away from camp is peer, again, I mentioned so previously, but peer collaboration. And I think for example, in a community like Vermont Academy, it's really, there's a lot of team, there's a lot of community engagement, there's a lot of collaboration amongst your peers. So I think fostering that, and also fostering kind of the creativity and the funny side of camp, because a lot of it is, or a lot of the parts that I loved as a kid is just you felt like you were totally just involved in all of that. So being able to just kind of shake it off and, you know, have that funny, goofy side of like singing and dancing or, you know, making jokes with your friends. That's pretty good. So something to do with just like kind of the attitude and the culture. But again, the peer collaboration community like VA, but for and I know a lot of other schools do something similar. So yes, yes, you.
So I totally recognize your problem with trying to convince towns, especially right now with budgets getting rejected all the time. Trying to get them to put money into anything is really hard. But I do think like your data from educators is really persuasive. So do you have any ideas for how to get those ideas to the people that you want to persuade?
That's a really good question. I've actually thought about this a lot, and as I'm like going, you know, into my college career, I really do think that this will be something that I'm studying further because I'm extremely passionate about it. Like I find myself talking during my planning blocks with Mr. Miller just about all different forms of camp. So that being said, I'm not exactly sure how I'd approach that, but I think it would involve a lot more research for me to kind of figure out the best way to strategically kind of put this, you know, up to a town or up to the board. So thank you. Okay, I think that's, oh, Carmen.
How would you encourage a younger child who's nervous or unsure to attend camp? Like, what is one piece of advice you personally would give?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I would just kind of, I think I'd preface with I know it's going to be scary, but you're going to make a lot of friends and you're always going to remember it. And that's something I feel like as like you go through the motions of camp, you're going to kind of stick through that and kind of remember like, okay, I'm making friends, like she said. And okay, like, wow, I'm going to remember this moment. So that means that I think that's what I'd say. Oh, Mr. Chance.
Have you seen any instance of, you know, corporate sponsors possibly funding some of these scholarship funds?
That's a good question. For a lot of my research, it was a lot of like state and local programs. I haven't really seen like are you asking like,
There's socially conscious, you know, companies that like Subaru has,
For
you
sure.
know, their things. Like, is there any way, you know, maybe REI or somebody?
Yeah, I mean maybe there is, but like from the research that I come across specifically for New England Camp, I hadn't come across that, but possibly there might be. Okay, anyone else?
I have
Oh, yes.
Is there a minimum amount of time the kid needs to spend at camp before he starts seeing the benefits of the program?
I have had counselors like, you know, answer that it's as much as 1 week, 1 week at summer camp. There are kids that at my summer camp, I quite literally live to go back to camp. The Copper Canyon camp takes in, you know, a variety of kids from, you know, all over the state of New Hampshire, and I've had kids come up to me and be like, oh, Sydney, I remember you. I've waited to see you all year. So it's one of those things where I think that even just like a week at a residential camp could truly impact the kids. So, okay. So, thank you, everyone. You to come back and watch the following two. I think we're going to do something similar where we're going to do a little break in between. So feel free to go out to the lobby, get refreshments, you know, whatever, use the restroom. But thank you so much for listening and have a fantastic night. there's 3 more tomorrow. There's 3 more tomorrow. It's either Jet Pass I wasn't waving at it. I was waving at Loja. I was waving at you that time. What? I was actually waving. Are you gonna ask me a question? Wow. Hello, everybody. My name is Iris, and like my fellow peers, this project serves as a culmination of my year-long independent research project. The scope of my research in particular serves to address the efficacy of organic adaptation and mitigation strategies. So before I kind of get into my process and what I found with my study, I want to elaborate a little bit on my personal connection to my topic. I've spent my whole life growing up in Vermont, and though I've lived in various different locations throughout the state, one thing remains true, and that is that growing up here has led me to cultivate a nearly intrinsic connection to the natural landscape. These are all pictures I've taken from my childhood. That's not me, that's my little brother. But I think that a big part of this is from my parents. I spent my childhood skiing in my backyard with my dad, going on hikes with my mom, and picking strawberries with Rocco. That being said, a lot of this ran far deeper than leisure, and my parents instilled a deep value of respect for my connection with the land. I was told to never kill spiders, and before each dinner we would recite the words, "Thank you, Mother Earth, for the food that you give us." As I've gotten older, because most of that was kind of forced upon me by my parents, as I've gotten older, I've come to define this for myself. I've begun to work on a local produce farm. That's where this picture is from. It's like right at the bottom of my driveway. and I've begun to volunteer at my town's local community garden. Though agriculture is immensely prevalent in my life and my family's life, it's also immensely prevalent throughout the state of Vermont. In regard to land use, approximately 20% of the land is utilized for agricultural production. This is around a little over 1 million acres of land. From a financial perspective as well, it holds great significance. As of 2022, approximately 4.2% of the state's GDP was derived from agricultural businesses and food sectors. Additionally, 64,000 Vermonters were employed in the years 2011 to 2020 by food-related businesses. Agritourism, which is like any tourist activity derived from agriculture, so strawberry picking, apple orchards, that accounted for over $1 million of revenue. So now I want to explain a little bit about what organic agriculture is and why I kind of selected it as a subset for my research. The USDA defines organic agriculture as the application of cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that support the cycling of on-farm resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. In terms of certifications, there are 771 certified organic producers. There are many more farmers throughout the state that implement organic practices, but in order to be certified, you kind of have to go through a whole process. So this is the number that are like officially certified. Though agriculture is well established throughout the state, the prevalence in the future is not. This led me to the development of my problem statement, which is the effects of climate change have become increasingly prevalent and volatile in the agricultural sector of Vermont, and as a result, organic produce farmers throughout the state have not been able to identify long-term adaptation and mitigation strategies to address this issue. So from there, I kind of developed 3 primary research questions to guide the trajectory of my research. Those are, what are the effects of climate change on organic produce farms? What strategies have been implemented by farmers? And finally, like, how successful have these strategies been? If so, why? And if not, why aren't they successful? So in order to address question 1 and kind of outline some of the effects of climate change, I conducted a literature review. From here, I concluded 4 primary sections. The first is changes in temperature, which is perhaps one of the most well-known effects of climate change. So a little background on that. This is caused by infrared active gases such as CO2, O3, or water vapor, H2O, which absorb the thermal radiation emitted by the Earth's atmosphere and the surface of the Earth. As of 2023, the land and ocean temperatures combined have increased by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit at a rate of 0.11 degrees Fahrenheit per decade since the year 1850. That being said, since 1982, this rate has tripled and is now increasing at 0.36 degrees per decade. If this continues at this rate and emissions continue at this rate, it's projected that by 2050, the Earth and ocean temperatures combined will rise by a minimum of 5 degrees and a maximum of 10 degrees. Though this alone is should be pretty scary. From here, there are a multitude of other effects that kind of stem off of this. The first that I decided to talk about was shifting plant hardiness zones. So plant hardiness zones are kind of defined by geographic locations that are differentiated by the average minimum temperature that they maintain. It's essentially, this is a map of them, right here, for the state of Vermont. It's essentially like the thresholds for different plants that grow and where they can grow. So as you can see, like in northern Vermont, that corresponds to like the minimum temperatures of -35 to 30, whereas down in southern Vermont by Bennington, it's like -15 to 10. So as warming temperatures are continuing to increase, these zones are shifting north, and it's affecting what plants can grow where and how they can grow. Additionally, the increase of invasive pests and weeds has been noted. So this is an ash borer, which is just like an example of one. But as temperatures are warming and things are migrating north, so are these pests. They're in search of like their ideal habitual temperatures. So it's kind of like this whole cycle of temperature rising. These are especially hard to manage, not these in particular, but invasive species, as they often require chemicals to be managed, and organic production does not like chemicals. Additionally, they compete for resources and really just damage the crops. Finally is the occurrence of volatile weather. So as many of you may know, in 2024 alone, there were 4 devastating floods that hit Vermont. This is because for every 1.8 degrees that the atmosphere warms, it holds approximately 7% more moisture. So warmer air has a greater capacity to hold moisture. Eventually, this moisture releases precipitation and leads to floods. That being said, flooding often works in tandem with droughts. As you can see, 24% of floods often occur after a period of drought. This is because as the ground dries out in a drought, the water has a harder time permeating the surface and often runs off. So it's kind of just this whole cycle of changing temperature causing all these other things. So once again, going back to organic agriculture, I didn't only select it for its prevalence throughout the state. I selected it because of its stance as a climate resilient and climate sensitive model. In terms of resilience, organic agriculture limits the exposure to synthetic materials such as GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, chemical-based fertilizers. Additionally, it has a high value in maintaining the natural landscape, less inputs and more just kind of like cultivating what's already existing. So that includes methods like cover crops, conservation tillage, contour plowing, just kind of working with the natural landscape. That being said, it's also somewhat climate sensitive, as it does depend on natural inputs. This leads to like more gradual and often less targeted results. Additionally, extreme weather conditions that uproot the soil can destroy the entire system and kind of just make everything a mess. So that kind of answers my first question, and to address my second one about what strategies have been implemented, I should first define adaptation and mitigation, because they're two terms that are easily convoluted. When I first started my presentation, as my mentor knows, I didn't really know the difference between these, and it kind of made everything a mess. So once I defined it, it helps a little bit. In terms of climate change, adaptation is adjusting to the effects of climate change and taking action to lessen the damage. So throughout the presentation, I'll refer to these as kind of like shorter term solutions. Mitigation is differentiated, as its goal is to lessen the future severity of climate change. This is done by like techniques that capture carbon and release emissions. So in order to answer this question, I had to go beyond the literature that was present, as a lot of it did not simply have anything. And so I decided to send out surveys and conduct interviews with farmers throughout the state. So as you can see, I emailed 15 farms. I emailed 5 from each region, northern, central, and southern, and I got 7 responses that were pretty like evenly distributed. From there, I had 3 that self-selected for an interview process. So in terms of my quantitative data, which is collected from my surveys, it's pretty straightforward. It's just that 100% agree that they have noticed the effects of climate change on their farm, and 100% have adopted strategies to try to manage those. It's just trying to like gauge a baseline. In terms of qualitative data, this is collected from my surveys, open-ended questions for my surveys, and interviews. I want to preface by saying that each bullet point is not necessarily like one response. It's kind of the way that I've made sense of the data by grouping it. So my first question is, what effects have you noticed on your farm? The 3 answers were increase in heavy precipitation, increased summer heat and dry periods, and changes regarding the dates of the frosts. So kind of going back to what I had said before about changing temperatures and such. In terms of strategies that have been adopted, I kind of grouped those into 3 primary categories as well. Those are alternative crop growing methods, changes to improve soil health, and prevention strategies specific to droughts and flood recovery. So to kind of delve a little bit deeper into each of those, I'll start with alternative crop growing methods. So this is just kind of anything that changes the production of the crops that are already being produced. One respondent said that they focus on shorter season crops. So this little table over here kind of shows crops and their different days of maturity on the earlier and later side. So as you can see, a short season crop is like a tomato, as it matures over 65 days, where a pumpkin over 110 is a longer season crop. Additionally, susceptible crops such as lettuce, anything that's easily damaged in the event of a flood, was moved to higher ground or to soils with better drainage. The use of high tunnels or greenhouses was implemented, as well as season extensions, which is like anything that allows for a crop to be cultivated outside of its normal growing period. And finally, more perennial crops. In terms of soil health and stability, there was cover crops, which are crops that cover the soil, such as grasses and sometimes just kind of weeds, like these are just clovers, but they're later incorporated into the soil for further enrichment. Cover crop rotations are like rotating the variety of a crop grown in a specific field to another one from year to year. So it's just kind of like both of these methods are trying to increase the variety of matter that's in the fields. And finally, mulch, which is a protective layer used to cover the soil. The last one that I noted was prevention strategies, particularly those for floods. So here we have a riparian buffer strip, which this is kind of like a little diagram. It's basically shrubs, trees, hardy plants planted on the bank that abuts like a river. and it's put there to prevent agricultural runoff. In the case of organic agriculture, that's like less significant because there's no chemicals, but still. And also to stabilize the bank. So like where it says outer is where crops would be cultivated, and it's just kind of a protective source. Question 3 was kind of switching a look to like more of the economic side of things and how this has impacted the farms. The farms stated that they had observed no loss in machinery or infrastructure, but they did observe an immense loss in crops. In the year 2024, one of the farms stated that they lost over $250,000 worth of crops, which is like a total loss for their farm. And the year after that, I believe it was $150,000. So like they improved a little bit, but it was basically back-to-back losses for their farm. Then I decided to ask about investments that were made to adapt to these changes. There weren't many. A lot of these farms are non-modern systems, as I have put up there. So they do require extra labor, funds, and time to be managed, but there's not a lot of new infrastructure or machinery being used. One farm did mention that they bulked their irrigation system, so that means like adding more piping, like increasing the pipes that they have, and then they got more greenhouses. This is kind of looking at the support received and the level of which that was at. So as you can see, only one person said that they didn't receive any support. And it was a pretty even distribution between organization-based, local, federal, and state. Federal would be like grants from the USDA. Organization, I know that there's No for Vermont, which is like an organic support system. Some colleges, such as UVM and UNH, also give like tech assistance for climate-related impacts. That being said, almost all of the farmers noted that federal funding is not designed for their farms. Diversified farms are farms that maintain a variety of crops, as opposed to like the Midwest that only grows corn or only grows like a monoculture crop. So a lot of this federal funding is not designed for those farms that require like, specialized assistance. The last question that I asked was kind of like addressing the main concerns for the future of farming in this region, given what has already been happening. One farmer stated seed shortages and like a further deterioration of agriculture throughout the United States. Another touched on the intersection of profit and affordability, as many of these farms have like basically been forced to increase their prices, but also like they have consumers that they want to support and that they know really well. It's kind of a tough line where like you need to live, but also to keep your business going in that way. Fewer small, local, and diversified farms. And the future location of farming, as some farmers stated that floodplains are the most fertile land to be farmed, but also the most perilous for floods. To address my final question and kind of look at have these strategies been successful, if so, why, I kind of broke it down into 2 primary concluding points. That is that short-term adaptation strategies have been implemented, and that there is room for improving longer-term strategies. So in that like transition to long-term, because that's not something that can happen overnight, I decided that the focus needs to shift to defining both short and long-term solutions. So based on my research, based on the interviews that I conducted, I found that these strategies were ones that worked for the farmers. Changing crop variety, planting location and timing, shifting to shorter season crops, and developing an action plan. These allow farmers to address problems immediately within the range that works for their production. The long-term ones that were beneficial were cover crop rotations, greenhouses, and riparian buffer strips. Ultimately, these are the goal as they lead to long-term resilience, but they do take time to build. So to conclude, farms could benefit more by implementing cost-effective strategies such as the ones I previously listed, or like the contour plowing, things that are encouraged by organic agricultural production that don't require a lot of cost. That being said, their inability to identify and implement long-term strategies stems from a lack of funding and knowledge on how to do so. Current funding and support, this is kind of essentially what I could find on the topic. Like I said before, the USDA has some programs. Right now it's kind of all up in the air, but this is kind of currently what they have. No for Vermont is like an organic support system just for Vermont farmers. The Vermont Agency of Agriculture has some loans, and then the Vermont Farm Fund loan program. That being said, there are significant gaps within the funding available. Like I said before, a lot of this funding isn't designed for these types of farms. And additionally, like if you were to even apply for a grant, it's a limited pool of funding and it's not 100% guaranteed that you're going to get that funding. Additionally, there have been a lot of cuts recently to the USDA. There's been a 10% cut to their discretionary funding, which is kind of like the funding that they can allocate to what they want to allocate. The Climate Smart Agriculture Program has been reduced, and the Organic Transition Research Program has been fully cut. That was kind of a support for farmers to like get education on organic production and kind of assist them in their transition. So, not ideal for organic agriculture. That being said, that's my kind of concluding point. If I would have had more time or like a different way to do this, I would have addressed these points. So the redistribution of agriculture, eventually, if climate change continues to increase in the way that it has increased, and if California continues to rise in temperature, it might become impossible to grow crops there. And I don't know if many of you know, but we get a lot of like our strawberries and our fruit in the winter from California and places like that. If it becomes impossible to grow produce there, it's going to have to be redistributed back to the source of production, which in our case would be Vermont. That being said, we are also having a hard time growing crops here, so I kind of just like figuring out what can grow here and how we can make that happen. Additionally, as I said before, the ultimate goal is increased funding and support for these farms. Though that is hard to accomplish, me and my mentor kind of came to the conclusion of a collective resource guide. This would look like kind of like a website or a book that outlines short-term and long-term mitigation strategies in a very clear way. It could be separated by farm size, crop types, and finances so that farmers have like a clear, definitive approach based on their, kind of like a choose your own adventure based on their farm. Though a lot of that, what I just said, may seem really foreign to all of you, I just want to really emphasize the prevalence of agriculture throughout Vermont. I know that it's something, like especially for those of us who live here, that we often take for granted, but agriculture is prevalent through every aspect of the state. Economics, tourism, even just like the quintessential landscape of it. And I know that we may not have the ability to give these farms funding, but what we can do as citizens of Vermont is to just learn more about where our food comes from, how it's produced, who's making it, and also try our best to engage in sustainable practices. I'm really passionate about this, and I hope that I was able to kind of impact all of you. If there's any questions, let me know, but thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I know that particularly organic farming, and you touched on this, is much more labor or can be much more labor intensive because you're avoiding spraying pesticides, herbicides, things like that. And like specifically just thinking of my own experiences, like running a little farming operation with insects, like specifically the kind of pests that move into an area as things get warmer. Did anyone in your journey through research, was anyone approaching the problem from that angle? Like trying to do more maybe recruiting or encouragement of those type of jobs to get more hands on deck?
In order to like address those kind of...
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people, like honestly, it was just kind of responding as best they could to what they have. I feel like in a lot of ways there wasn't much logic to it, partially because there really couldn't be. They were kind of just like scrambling to fix that. And honestly, invasive pests wasn't really one of the categories that a lot of farmers responded to. It's just something that I noted in my research. But I think like that would be something that I could put in that resource guide of like, here's what you can do when those things arise. Because I feel like a lot of people are just kind of going in randomly without much knowledge. Yeah. Any other questions? Dr. Martin?
A lot of this seems kind of negative and sort of scary because a lot of it is, but can you envision any scenario that maybe this is an opportunity to kind of go back to some things that served communities well for a long time and sort of relocalize our food sources and our productivity and our agriculture?
Most definitely. Like with the whole redistribution of agriculture point, I think that's something that can kind of be built back up. And I know like organic farming is a method that is pretty sustainable. I know also regenerative farming is kind of a newer wave thing that I'm not even fully sure of myself. But I think, though negative, it kind of is almost like a fresh start to kind of build back up and re-strengthen and put support into those practices that are proving to be sustainable. And I think just as our knowledge increases, we can just further support farmers and kind of learn more about our land and kind of go back to the more simple ways of things, for sure. Mr. Janis?
Were there any any farms that are really doing something creative and innovative in a way to get their product out there and seen? Do you see anything on that side of it? The marketing and how they engage with the community?
That was definitely something that I didn't touch on as much, but like kind of going back to the pricing things, it's like they still really want to have that affordability and community-driven approach. I feel like that's very important to all of these farms. That's something that I'll have to look more into, but in this, I didn't fully touch on that. I think it's more just like kind of, I know like a lot of CSAs were really present and just kind of like having those little hubs for people to kind of come in, talk to the farmers. It's just kind of fostering those connections, but yeah. Dr. Zakar?
Do you see organic farmers more immediately aware of climate change than those who use pesticides and other management? And if so, how long is it going to take for there to be awareness, including also, I'm just thinking about ranchers and how they climate change too. I mean, when are we going to, in your opinion, unify and accept that this is true?
That's a really good question. When I was even like choosing my topic, I was kind of lost on which method of production I wanted to focus on. At first I was kind of interested in dairy production, but then I switched to agriculture and then I was like, okay, there's regenerative, organic, conventional. I wanted to do a comparison between conventional and organic and kind of get like that perspective you were speaking on. I think in order for me to answer that, I would need to conduct more research on like the comparison. But I definitely know that organic producers throughout the state are very aware, and I think because they have to be about this. Whereas I think maybe sometimes with, I'm just inferring, but with conventional practices where they can kind of just cover it up with the pesticides and with those kind of production methods, I think it's less prevalent, but I'm sure still very prevalent on their farms. Ms. Vignelas?
Did you speak with anyone about how they had to take care of their land after flooding?
Yeah, a little bit. It was just completely devastated. Like as I said, there was like 250, like total loss of crops. And a lot of it was just building back up. And also the issue was there was a lot of back-to-back flooding, so like the land even now is still kind of in a recovery period. The best way that I saw for farmers to deal with that was to kind of develop a plan moving forward. So like in the case of a flood, they now know how they're going to move all their crops. And they now know like they're going to grow these certain things in greenhouses because they're easily damaged. Yeah.
But does the soil itself become contaminated because you don't know where the water is coming from?
I think I talked to one farmer about that, and they had to like fully like rototill and remove like a lot of their, I mean it was all kind of just washed away. They had to like start a whole new field and bed. But I can imagine with a lot of these, yeah, probably. Any other questions?
Just if you're going to continue to study this in college, what are some of the things you'd love to look at next?
I think that comparative approach is like super interesting to me, but also just kind of familiarizing myself with different forms of production. What exactly is regenerative agriculture? What's like the best way to move forward? And also like I'm also really interested in learning about the science of the soil and the crops and why they grow better in these conditions. And so I think just kind of like making a unified approach, I'm really interested in. I'm going to study agroecology, so I think that this is a good way to pursue it. But yeah. Yeah. Jack?
Which crop are you saddest about leaving because of climate change?
Which crop am I saddest about leaving because of climate change? Probably kale. I really like kale. And my mom makes really good kale Caesar salad, so yeah. Any other questions before I introduce Maya? All right, thank you again for listening. We're going to do another brief intermission before our final speaker of the night comes up.
Yeah, I can hear you yelling.
Germans have figured out a way to
developments of xenobots. So I talk a little bit about how they're made and what they will hopefully achieve in the future. This isn't on. Oh, okay. So in 2017, a University of Vermont professor, Dr. Josh Bongard, and his doctoral student, Sam Kriegman, created an artificial intelligence that simulated modifiable soft robots which would fulfill a multitude of different functions. The soft robots were simulations of cell configurations. Dr. Douglas Blackiston at Tufts University saw the models and drew similarities between the simulated cells in the AI model and Xenopus labia cells, which are African clawed frog cells. So he suggested that UVM and Tufts begin to collaborate on creating these biological robots out of Xenopus cells. So before I continue, I want to define why a biological robot is a robot. Through my research, I have found that robots are not defined by their materials, but are instead defined by their autonomy, rational design, and their ability to complete human-specified work, all of which biological robots fulfill. And then I want to talk a little bit about terminology. So there has been some discourse in the researching community around the names of these biological robots and what they should be referred to as. Some believe that there should be one overarching term that everybody uses, such as biological robots or biobots or reconfigurable organisms. While some believe that there should be differing terms depending on which biobot they're talking about. So, for example, xenobots for biobots made out of xenopus cells, or anthrobots for biobots made out of human lung cells. I have decided to use an overarching term. I use a couple of different ones in my research, but the three that I do use are biological robots, biobots, and reconfigurable organisms. And then I do define the two biobots that I talk about, xenobots and anthrobots, by what they are created from. So then, how did we get to the first xenobots? So the first biological robots weren't completely biological. They were a mix between cells and chemical substances, such as 3D printed scaffolds or gels. With these scaffolds and gels and muscle-based movement, the biohybrid robots were able to propel themselves. A little bit after this, with some more research, they were able to create biobots made completely out of cells. And they did this by finding animal caps that were covered with cilia. So an animal cap is a piece of developing embryo which would eventually become the ectoderm if it was allowed to develop naturally. Once they are taken away and the scientists begin to develop them in the way they want to, they make sure to become covered with cilia, which cilia are small hair-like structures that help the animal cap and then future xenobots move throughout water, similar to how tadpoles move. So cilia will helps biobots move, basically. And the animal caps that the researchers that I know of were researching were from the xenopus cells. Now, how did they make the xenobots act different from one another? They found multiple ways to program the cilia-covered animal caps away from their natural behavior. Researchers used the computer programs to design and simulate different forms to maximize their desired behaviors. They looked to maintain these behaviors across a range of simulated environments and challenges. They also found that in vitro actions with muscle-based movement systems and cilia-based movement systems differed from one another. And so they researched that, as well as if they created a xenobot with both of the movement systems. but yes, these different movement systems created these bots to act differently and eventually fill different purposes. Where did they go from there? So researchers extracted the embryonic frog cells and differentiated the heart and skin cells. The skin cells they used to create the structure of the xenobot, and the heart cells they used as muscle actuation, so the heart cells would relax and contract to move the xenobot along. They move at different speeds or in different directions by the arrangement of their cardiac tissues, and so if the cardiac tissues are arranged in a different way, they'll probably move in a different way. The researchers merged these xenobots together with microsurgery tools, but it also helped that the cells were naturally sticky, so they stayed together a little bit easier than normal. So here's a couple of diagrams that I found to be helpful in my research. So up here are the computer simulated models, and they are xenobots that came from them. And then down here shows the difference between the cilia-actuated xenobots and the muscle-actuated xenobots, and as well as how they were built. So these ones were the ones built with the microsurgery tools. So the researchers then wanted to test the reaction that xenobots had to other materials. So they placed dye particles on the bottom of the petri dishes that they had the xenobots in, and they found that the xenobots started clumping the particles together. So they then switched the dye particles with cells and changed the design of xenobots a little bit to fit the purpose a bit better. They settled on this Pac-Man-like design. The xenobots, which are these things, and the cells are here. The xenobots would move around and clump the cells together, thus creating more xenobots. Some further advancements, the researchers found that the xenobots were able to maintain functions and structures and behave in many different ways without human intervention. They were adaptive, could go around obstacles, and repair themselves after significant damage. All of this shows that the xenobots show a lot of plasticity, which plasticity is the ability to adjust and change behavior due to circumstances that arise. And they showed this through their development and regeneration. So then the researchers wanted to determine if that plasticity was just specific to amphibian cells or if mammal cells could exhibit the same plasticity. So the researchers at Tufts extracted cells from human lung epithelium, which then became self-constructing biobots. They self-construct in vitro without external help, and multiple biobots were able to construct at the same time. These anthrobots, which I call them, and many other researchers call them, move using cilia and live for about 45 to 60 days. They show a range of structure and form, which are correlated with certain features of their anatomy. And due to their ability to form functional structures and exhibit unique behaviors, the researchers were able to confirm that plasticity is general to wild-type cells, and not just specific to amphibian cells. So why did the researchers decide to use human lung cells? They decided to use human bronchial epithelial cells because of the cell's existing ability to form multicellular spheroids that have cilia-lined lumina. To make the anthrobots motile, they had to figure out how to get the cilia to face outward and not just inside towards the lumina. Spoiler alert, they figured it out. So the cilia naturally face into the lumina because of their interaction with their surrounding high viscosity environment. So the researchers hypothesized that if they changed the surrounding environment to a low viscosity one, it would make the basal layer cells move inward, which would then allow the aptical layer cells to take their place, and thus maybe the cilia might grow outwards. This wasn't completely correct, but They then transferred these organisms that they grew in the low viscosity environment to a low adhesive environment and induced them with retonic acid bidaily, as well as performed media changes every 3 days. Once they did this, they found that the spheroids grew cilia and became motile in day 7. So these are the spheroids on day 1 of their, growth, and then day 7 after being induced with the retonic acid in the low adhesive environment. So some further examination of anthrobots. The Tufts team set up 3 different conditions of seeding with varying initial density. So they did the default density, which is the low viscosity environment that they created these bots from. They did double the default density and half the default density. They kept the rest of the development consistent and measured the motility between days 9 and 20, which is when the anthrobots showed peak mobility. They observed a difference in size and mobility between different seeding conditions, which suggests that initial seeding density is a tractable control for morphology and functions of different anthrobots. From there, they wanted to identify morphological properties and movement to determine if they are discrete, continuous, or uniform. So some more about anthrobot movement. The team took time-lapse videos of about 200 randomly selected bots, and they extracted movement types from these bots and their movement trajectories. The 2 main trajectory characterization metrics were straightness and gyration indices. They then ran Ward D2, which is a common hierarchical clustering method, and found 4 distinct clusters, each representing a distinct movement type. They found circular, linear, curvilinear, and eclectic. On here this is circular, linear, and curvilinear. Circular and linear make up over half of the population of anthrobots. The circular, which, as I showed earlier, is the yellow, scored highest on the gyration index and lowest on the straightness index, whereas the linear, which is the green, scored highest on the straightness index but lowest on the gyration index. The curvilinear, which is the 3rd most common anthrobot, scored high on both indices. The eclectic anthrobots are not, an eclectic anthrobot is not shown in this image because they have the lowest population of all anthrobots. They have the most disorganized trajectories, and they score low on both the straightness index and gyration index. They show a combination of the other 3 movement types. With some continued research, the Tufts team found evidence that anthrobots self-organize into 3 different morphotypes. So morphotype 1 is smaller and more regularly shaped, whereas morphotypes 2 and 3 are larger and more irregularly shaped. The difference between morphotype 2 and morphotype 3, however, is that morphotype 2 has non-polarized cilia, and morphotype 3 has polarized cilia. So they then wanted to find if there was correlation between morphotypes and movement types, and they found that yes, there is a correlation. They analyzed the different movement types and which morphotypes they resembled, and found that 100% of motile anthrobots that move around their environment, so displacing anthrobots, fit into morphotypes 2 and 3. And there is a correlation between morphotype 2 and linear bots, as well as a correlation between morphotype 3 and circular bots. The motile anthrobots, or anthrobots that can move, that fit into morphotype 1 were non-displacing, which means they stayed stationary but would kind of wiggle a little bit in place. And then 62% of non-motile anthrobots, or non-movers, also fit into morphotype 1. So here's a little diagram of the different morphotypes and how they move. So as you can see, the cilia on morphotype 2 is polarized, and the cilia on the cilia on morphotype 3 is polarized, and the cilia on morphotype 2 is not. And then the two smaller anthropods are morphotype 1. So researchers then wanted to find the researchers then wanted to see how anthrobots will react to environments different from the ones that their component cells have in vivo. So the Tufts team decided to test the anthrobots' ability to move across damaged live tissues, which is not natural for their component cells. The team produced 2D confluent layers of human neurons that were extracted from human-induced neural stem cells, which are somatic cells that had been reprogrammed. They then mechanically scratched away the neuron layer by about 400 to 1,000 microns and placed the anthrobots into the scratches where they were then allowed to move freely. They recorded a time-lapse video to observe the anthrobots' behavior, and they saw that the anthrobots were able to efficiently move across the damaged tissue. The research team then wanted to find if collective behavior changed the abilities of these anthrobots. So they decided to form a type of superbot, which, to do so, they constrained multiple anthrobots in a smaller dish, and they wanted to then test the effect that those superbots had on the scratch and the surrounding cells. They then placed the superbots across the scratch, similarly to how, do you guys know when ants have a divide that they can't cross, so they create like a bridge out of their bodies? They did that with the superbots. They wanted to see if the superbots would repair the scratch like a mechanical stitch, and within 72 hours, there was a substantial regrowth of the native tissue. So there was a stitch like right under the superbots, but there wasn't nowhere else along the scratch closed. They did, however, find that underneath the stitch, the density of the gap closure was equal to the surrounding tissue, which means that there was a full recovery of the tissue. So, future of biobots. Researchers intend to achieve many more things. One such thing is to minimize the carbon footprint. So the computer program that is used to find the best xenobot design takes a lot of energy and a lot of carbon. They're trying to find other ways to create designs that emit less carbon and can be produced faster. Biobots also show many possibilities in the biomedical field. So the plasticity that they exhibit show promise in them eventually becoming useful for medical applications, such as the one showed by the superbots where they regenerated the damaged tissue. There's also hope that anthrobots may be able to help drugs target specific areas in the body, which anthrobots would be helpful in the body because they're less likely to decompose or give terrible side effects like their mechanical counterparts. And then there's hope to use them in some environmental research. Since they are completely organic, they pollute less than most machines used to research the environment. They may be able to research parts of the ocean that we haven't been able to research before due to this less pollution that they emit. And since they show the ability to collect and move cells, there is hope that maybe they might be able to clean microplastics or other toxic waste. Or just waste, I guess. Some ethicality and impact concerns is, while none are very pressing, there is the thought that like the carbon footprint isn't that ethical. There is concern about carbon footprint through like almost every stage of biobot research, and while there is a team working on finding a less environmentally harmful alternative to the ones that emit all this carbon, they haven't found it quite yet. There's also the concern of artificial intelligence. While we're like almost certain that AI isn't gonna try and harm us, there is the possibility that someone may program the AI, again, not very, like, to harm people. Again, not very pressing, but like that is a concern that has been spoken. And then the reconfiguration of living cells. The cells, while they don't have a brain, are living, so there's a little bit more of an ethical, like, gray area around research with them than there is with research with mechanical robots. I now want to talk a little bit about my study limitations. So there have been teams working on finding biological robots for many years, but xenobots have, like the xenobots that were created, have only been around for 5 years. So there's not a lot of information surrounding them, like what they'll be able to do in the future or what their potential either positive or harmful impact will be. So there is that. And then I want to talk a little bit about my connection to xenobots, so how I found them, how I learned about them. I first learned about them actually at a summer program, Sydney summer program, which was very beneficial to me. It was a Governor's Institute program about mathematical sciences, and a UVM professor came and talked to us about the biological robots that he created and showed us a video of them moving around underneath the microscope, and it was really, really kind of creepy to me, actually. I was a little bit freaked out because I was like, robots that are made out of cells that was created by AI, like that kind of freaked me out a little bit. But the more research I did into it, the more like fascinated I became. And so I decided to focus on that for my year-long project. Yeah, so thank you to everybody who helped me with the project, Mr. Ichandis, Dr. Zakara, Ms. Koch, and for everyone who supported me. I appreciate it. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned Tufts a lot. Did you try and connect with them and go visit?
I did. I connected with Professor Michael Levin, who is another researcher working on this project. Unfortunately, there wasn't any space in the lab for me to go and observe, but I met with him a couple times and he gave me a bunch of sources that were really helpful. But yes, yeah. Yes, Mr. Chambers.
What are the lifespan of these things? Like you talked about them being able to regenerate. What is the lifespan? And then follow up just to that, is there any work being done to design a limited lifespan?
I do not know about the second question. I didn't find that in any of my research, but I know the anthrobots can live to about 45 to 60 days, whereas the xenobots, I believe, only live about 25 to 30.
So currently their lifespan is limited.
Yeah, limited to about a month. But yes, they are limited. I don't know about any research looking towards like either extending that or limiting that even more. I will have to look into that. That's actually interesting as I think about it. Yes, Mr. Narkin.
May not have come across this in your research, but was there anything about the immune system response to a xenobot? You know, like when you get a vaccination, the immune system immediately attacks that, right? And what about these? It's a foreign body. Is the cell it's made out of, does that kind of camouflage it in a way? Or, I don't know, did you come across anything?
Yeah, I didn't find anything about that. I don't know if they're quite using them on like living humans yet. I know that the tissue that they scratched was reprogrammed from cells that they took from another area of the body. But no, I don't believe I found anything on that. Yes, Darlene.
First of all, you did so great.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, in your opinion, do you think the ethical dilemmas that
I've actually been thinking a lot about that. I don't know. It's hard to know because we don't quite know what xenobots, other than like being able to regenerate that line of tissue, what they are able to do yet. I think that it's definitely like something that researchers need to fully consider before they move on with it. Like if they believe that what they will create will be astronomical in the medical or even like environmental sphere, and if they are willing to kind of cross a couple ethical lines, or maybe not fully cross them, but like play around with them a little bit, to like create these. I think it's definitely something that people need to think about on their own. I think if I were to be able to like go in and create these bots, I think I would have to consider that a little bit more for myself as well. I hope that answered your question. Yes, Ms. Hilton.
I was just wondering, like, what the potential platforms for where this research could be applied. Like, is it for immunity things? Is it for organ development? Is it for diseases? Like, where are you finding it's trending? Is where it can potentially lead as like a really, incredible place to generate new development and medical innovations.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm hopeful that it will be able to help in multiple different like spheres. I mean, they're taking cells from human lungs that can regenerate other cells. So maybe, hopefully, like helping out with what's that called? Cardiothoracic like implications or things like that. Unfortunately, again, there still isn't too much knowledge. It's still like it's like in its baby phase. So I wish I knew more. Again, I think there's possible hope to use them in a bunch of different everywhere. There is like new information coming out every day, so I'm always fascinated to learn more about it. But yeah, I don't know. I wish I could answer more questions, but unfortunately, like they're very, very new. Is there Raymond?
So, just to clarify, the way we're controlling it is like putting it into different conditions and have it reacted differently to like different conditions and then create it for. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So they're researching how they behave in different conditions to see if they can best control their design or like best control their abilities to do certain things in these different environments. I believe there's also hope to maybe like be able to design them so one interbot could do multiple different things in one environment or in like multiple environments, multiple different environments. That's what I was trying to say. Yes, Dr.
So I wondered, you really focused in on a great example of the scratch and the almost the regeneration and the exact density. I mean, that's I think has a ton of potential. And I'm just wondering if you saw in your research anything about these things being able to work with scar tissue.
I didn't.
Like for example, like with nerve endings aren't able to reconnect if they're disturbed by scar tissue with paralysis.
Yeah.
So I'm just, the fact that they can do this with a scratch makes me wonder what they can do to, connect things that are obstructed by scar tissue.
Yeah.
It's just an idea. I didn't know if you saw anything, but
I didn't. But I think that would be definitely interesting. I mean, knowing about their the ways that they interact with other cells different from the ones that like their component cells. Possibly, like I think that would be a really interesting thing for some researchers to consider. But I haven't found anything about that yet. No.
it's almost like they're sent on missions of healing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the more that we can direct them and see what they can do, the more
Yeah.
possibilities.
I mean, their ability to connect two different like sides of a scratch might show possibility in connecting those nerve endings. Yeah. Yes, Ms. Koch.
Maya, you referenced a lot research that's being
Well, I don't know exactly about Tufts, but I do know that UVM's research funding is unfortunately being cut. I also know that, like I just found out today, that there was a Russian scientist who brought these like xenopus cells, and I mean, unfortunately, she got detained because she didn't.
By
They didn't.
ice.
Yeah, by ice. She got detained by ice, unfortunately. But I think that might show evidence of people elsewhere wanting to further this research, and hopefully the rest of the world seeing that our funding is being cut, like U.S. funding is being cut, that they might try and step in and take over some of this research. Yeah. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming.
These are the first 4 of our 7 capstone projects. There are 3 more tomorrow night. In case you didn't know, the students have spent an entire year researching. They wrote about a 25-page research paper, and they were looking at hands-on applications and hands-on experiences of what they learned. And many of them will continue to study these things in colleges, and we are incredibly proud of the work that they've done. So please come back tomorrow. We have 3 more capstone presentations, and thank you to everyone who spoke tonight.